Hello to you. Well, my name is Scott Picken. I'm the CEO and founder of Migrate, and every single year I do this video, which is at the end of the year, and it's all the lessons that I've learned for the year. So it's 2019. We've got 19 lessons that I've learned this year, and to be honest, I've learned a hell of a lot more. It's quite difficult to condense it down into 19 different lessons. Now, we're going to have a bit of fun. It's not a sort of a formal presentation. I'll be jumping around between different presentations in terms of PowerPoint. At home, and my son and his friends are outside making lots of noise, so I'm holed up in the bedroom here, and so I'm sure you might hear a bit of background children or dogs barking or whatever. But it's also one of the most fun videos that I do of the year in terms of getting people's feedback. So I'd love your feedback in terms of, when you see this on social media, post below if there's any other lessons that I've missed. I generally do book recommendations. I haven't actually this year because I struggled to fit in all the lessons. But if there's books that you would recommend for 2019, I'd highly recommend that you post them below. If you think this adds value, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel. And I suppose without further ado, let's rock and roll and get straight into it. So I'm going to be jumping around between many different slides here and really sharing with you what I believe are some of the most important parts. So let's start off quickly with this one, which if I share my screen, it's something that I spoke about in 2018, and it's all about new power, old power. And it's really, really fascinating for me because Richard Branson in 2018 said this was the best book of 2018. And there's a great Harvard Business Review, which is all around old power models, old power values, new power models, new power values. And the book that I highly recommend reading is New Power. You can see it here, and like I said to Richard Branson, said it was his best book to read. Now, this came out in 2018, but I'm repeating it in 2019, and I'm starting off with it because more and more I'm seeing a fundamental shift. I summarized this year, I summarized that book, and you can see in terms of on the left-hand side, you've got return, you've got global and purposeful, you've got exponential, and you've also got short-term risk. And if you take companies like Encyclopedia Britannica, they're in the bottom left-hand corner. And, everyone said Wikipedia will never work. And yet today, Wikipedia is the 8th most followed website in the world. And I guarantee you there's no one out there that's stupid enough to be going and buying an Encyclopedia Britannica when the information is actually far better on Wikipedia. I don't have time today to talk about how that happened, but I do have a video, and maybe if you want to click on the link below, on the 8 technology trends and the 8 social trends that are all interacting and how they're going to disrupt the $217 trillion real estate industry. And I'll put the link below where you can actually click on that recording. If you take Marriott Hotels, the oldest hotel group in the world, started in the 1920s, got 657,000 beds. And then you've got Airbnb in the top right corner with over 5 million beds per night. Much, much bigger, much, much more valuable, and yet own no assets. The bottom left-hand corner, Barnes & Noble and many, many bookstores have gone out of business. And then you've got Amazon that became the wealthiest company on the planet this year and continues just to grow and grow and grow. And then you've got these old school property companies with old school property mindsets. And they're in the bottom left-hand corner. And then you've got platforms like Migrate, which are in the top right-hand corner, which is all about new power, values and a new power model. And it's really interesting for me when you look at long-term risk, it equally changes from right to left in terms of long-term. In the short term, it might be better to be an old school company. But in the long term, there's much more risk. And you can see that with Barnes & Noble and what's happened with Amazon, Encyclopedia Britannica, and what's happened with Wikipedia, Marriott, and what's happened with Airbnb. And so I wanted to share one thing with you. And like I said to you, I'm going to be jumping around between slides here. And that was this in terms of new power and old power. And one of the things that I found absolutely fascinating in 2019, and actually the reason that this slipped in as the first lesson of 2019, was primarily for me around some of the behaviors of old power companies. So as you know, we restructured our group, and we've got 2 different companies now in the property company and the platform company. And it's amazing, the property company, how it's very much driven by old power values and old power model, basically. Now, it doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it a way of doing business. And it's all about complying and consuming. It's all about just getting people to invest. It's all about, them looking after themselves and what is in it for themselves. And it's amazing how the world has changed, and how if you focus and if you've got an old school mindset, you're going to have old power, old values. And no matter how much you try and change, it's ingrained in your DNA. And it's very, very difficult to change. And that's what this old power behavior is all about. Whereas new power behaviors is about sharing, affiliating, adapting, funding, producing, or even shaping. Now, I've got a LinkedIn article all around this. If you're interested, go and find it on my LinkedIn. And the reason, I brought this up was that it was amazing for me in 2019, being a shareholder of both companies. It was amazing, the old power values and the old power models coming through in the one company where there was very little trust. It was all about the individuals running the company. It was not about anyone else, not the community, not the investors, not the shareholders. And yet on the other side of the fence, it was, all about the community, all about the shareholders, all about the investors, and all about a growth, abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. And it's just incredible how the world's changing, and how fundamentally, if you don't have the right DNA to be a new power company with a new power model, it's virtually impossible to change. And, for me, I found that absolutely fascinating watching as that evolved this year. And I suppose one of the lessons I learned is that there's no point in trying to change people. A leopard can't change its spots. And another great saying I heard this year was, if you can't change people, which I found very, very interesting. The next one, and this is probably the biggest lesson I learned in 2019, was around digital marketing. And so what I mean about digital marketing is we've all known for the last 5 to 10 years that digital marketing was absolutely critical to your business. And yet what I realized was that in like the property space, the real estate space, there was still very little digital marketing going on, or certainly effectively. And that wasn't until a guy called Cardone came across. And if I find you the slides here, in terms of what Cardone was doing, everyone thought that now to go digital was just purely around going digital and, not having a sales team and everything else. And what's becoming more and more apparent around the world is that digital marketing is critically important. However, to achieve it, you've got to have an offline sales team, people that can speak to humans. So Paul Nadira, one of our board members, is a good friend with someone who works with Tony Robbins and that whole crowd, and Grant Cardone and all of them. If you look at Get Smarter, which is one of the biggest online learning platforms, you look at what Roger Hamilton did, and we started to realize that it was really important to have digital marketing, but also to have your human connection. And if you look here, this is a guy called Grant Cardone. He's raising the most money in terms of property from investors. So I'm not talking institutional, but directly from investors. You can see he raised $270 million in 1 week in multiple multi-families. We re-engineered his whole process of how he's doing it with upsells and downsells and everything else. And it's all around education-based marketing. For a bunch of our shareholders, they came back to us and they said, "Oh, why do you have WealthE University? It's a distraction, etc." But it's really interesting. The fastest growing companies all have digital marketing on the front end. They've all got educational-based marketing. And you can see here his books, cheap books, $14 for the book, different courses. I know this is blurred, but it's hard to get it all on one page. So live courses, online courses, digital courses, communities that you're joining at $99. And then once you actually buy the digital, the digital stuff, then you go through to setting up as to whether you're a qualified investor and ultimately investing. And, from that, we worked very hard with a guy called Neil Malan, that's also one of the best in the world. And, a guy that I met in 2017. It was really interesting because I started with the old power, new power, and I went to my board in 2017. I said, this guy, Neil Malan, is an incredible guy. He wants to help us with our educational-based marketing on the front end. The way that he proposes is that he takes 50% of the revenue that we earn out of the educational digital products. We get the other 50%. We self-fund the entire business through digital and education-based marketing. And then ultimately we get a plethora of investors on the back end. And my board at the time in 2017 said, why would we give away 50% of our revenue? And I was like, but that is such old power thinking, because you're giving away 50% of something you don't have. You're earning 50% of something that you don't have. 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. 10% of a watermelon is better than 100% of a grape. And that is new power thinking and new power models. Anyway, this year, after we went through the restructure and everything else, I got hold of Neil Malan. We've done a huge amount of work with Neil and really, he deserves a huge amount of credit. He also helped us find a performance marketer. I didn't even know what a performance marketer was. We went out and found a performance marketer. He recommended that the best company we could go and look for someone was a company called Get Smarter. They're a company that this year will earn about $100 million in revenue. They're one of the best online education platforms. They've got the likes of Harvard, Stanford, some of the best Oxford, universities around the world. And they do online courses all through partnerships. And we got their performance marketer. He runs a team of 80 people. He basically had a budget of about $12 million, of which he brought in a revenue of nearly $50 million. That's a ROAS, a return on ad spend, of 400 to 500%. And, in 2018, I was trying so hard to learn about all this digital marketing stuff. And I went with Richard Dunn, my partner, and we went over to Bali and we, tried to do courses. And this year we just decided there's no ways we can learn fast enough what we need to learn. We need to go out there and hire the best. And I'm really excited to say that Aubrey joined us as our Chief Growth Officer in 2019, now in December. So really excited to where the world's going next year and how you can grow your business. And the best lesson here is that if you've got digital marketing on the front end with educational products, you can actually create a self-fulfilling, self-funding mechanism for your entire marketing process. And you can see on the left-hand side, there's a whole bunch of software that we've now got where we build out the digital journeys. Again, I did explain that in the trends video that I'd highly recommend going to watch, because it's absolutely fascinating. It's an entire science, and around the science, you can create predictability. And they always say in business, it should be test, measure, predict, scale. And once you've got the predictability, you have the ability to scale. And it's really, really interesting. And I'm so excited about the progress we've made in terms of where we're at. So I think that is really important. Oh, I wanted to share a couple of other things around that lesson. We launched our inner circle back in pretty much this time last year. And we've now got, over 500 people that have joined it. We also launched our digital starter pack this year, which makes it really easy for people to sign up with $100. And these were things that pretty much in 2019 were all in beta stage, but have been highly, highly successful with great feedback, great testimonials, made a significant difference on people's lives. And if I show you here quickly, and I need to find the slides that I'm looking for here. Here we are. Is that as you target, millennials and the rise of the middle class, there's four things that they basically want. And the first one is they want education, and it's all around education. And luckily enough for us, we've been doing education-based marketing since we started the business in 2004. The second thing is they want community. The third thing is they want to be able to invest. They want to learn while doing. And the fourth thing is they want purpose. And that is what we created our entire inner circle around. And, you can see here the huge rise of these online learning platforms. There's been a large amount of growth in online investing, but not large adoption. And the way to solve that is with trust. The new economy is all around trust. And we believe by having the Wealth University and the platform, we can bridge the gap of trust. And that's where Aubrey becomes, so valuable and Richard and Lee and everything that the team is doing, Shane, in terms of, growing the team. And I'm not going to bore you, but that's what our Wealth Inner Circle was all about. And it's been highly, highly successful with our Wealth University and everything else. And, a bunch of these things that I'm talking about are all value adds that we've had, within our Wealth University and what we've been doing. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you, and it's all about the impact meter. Where's it gone now? Oh, it was a picture. So this is from Roger Hamilton, and it's all around the impact metrics. So if you're wanting to build a $20 million company, you need to have 1 million followers, 200,000 in your community, 40,000 prospects, 10,000 customers, and you'll be building a $20 million company. And you've got sort of level 1 to level 5. There's actually 10 levels. So this is just the start. And it's amazing how accurate this is. We're sitting, in or around, between a $1 million and a $5 million company. We've got 117,000 followers. We've got 24,000 members. It's just amazing when you draw these lines through, and we've got sort of 1,500 investors. So it's really, really interesting. The one thing that's higher here is our average investment is $10,000. But it's absolutely fascinating as this works. And what I wanted to show you in terms of these metrics is you can see how this predictability becomes so valuable. And this is all the work that Richard did, where he pretty much copied what Genius U, and I'm going to talk about Entrepreneur 4.0 and 5.0 later, where you got followers, you got community, you got prospects, you got customers, and you got raving fans. And we built that down and broke that down into our different followers, our community, our prospects, our customers, our raving fans, where they come through, how they come through. And this becomes so interesting because you then build this all out into your team charters, which is our value planning cycle. And you can basically see here what our targets are for the entire year, and then you can see the breakdown of where we need to be in terms of followers, community, prospects, etc., etc. So it becomes so interesting of the predictability. Now, can you believe it? We've only done 2 lessons, and I apologize because I get excited and there's lots to share in this thing. The third thing for me, the third lesson was around seeders. And I think I've got to go, sorry, I've got to jump around between the slides here. I want to go up quickly to Back to the Future, and I want to go up to seeders. So seeders was really interesting. We built our entire company on the value of our community. I believe it's our greatest asset, and we had 140 shareholders around the world. We call them wealth partners. And then we launched a concept called With Seeders, which was an equity crowdfunding platform out of the UK. We ended up raising $2.5 million, so £2 million, $2.5 million. We actually got it from 863 investors in 43 countries on a 10x valuation of revenue. We had independent valuers do it, but it's so interesting how this can change the rules of the game. And what I like most is that now we've got investors all around the world, we've got shareholders all around the world, we've got community members all around the world from 43 different countries, and they've now got a vested interest in helping the company succeed. And what's fascinating is that in the old days, people used to only invest once there was an IPO in Facebook or an Amazon. Then most of us would have loved to have invested in an Uber or an Airbnb. Most people don't want to invest in a ranked startup, but a company that's in high growth, that's what technology is now allowing people to do. And that's why we allowed people to grow up the value chain. And if you want to become a wealth partner, it's what we call a shareholder. Get hold of us. We're always looking for wealth partners or strategic partners that can add value. There's 3 things that we say you need. The first is that you want to go on a profitable journey. You want to make a profit. As an example, $10,000 invested in Amazon pre-IPO is worth $12 million today. The second is you want to be part of a global community. You want to learn and grow and become a global citizen. You can see behind me, I've got global citizen. I believe it's all about the future and about being a global citizen. And we want people to evolve and grow. And I get phenomenal feedback all day long from people about the value they get out of being part of the community. I know for me, it's one of the things I'm most grateful for. And the third thing is they want to come on a purposeful journey. And, for me, if those 3 things resonate with you, then it could be something that you should talk to us about in terms of becoming a wealth partner. But what's also interesting by doing the Seeders, thing, it's also about customer acquisition costs. Ken Williams and I have been talking about we should do this all around the world because we can grow the team, we can grow the community, we can, we got a partner coming out of India who invested $250,000. Now we're growing India with him, and his family. It's just incredible how technology completely makes the world flat and makes it so global. The fourth lesson was around Kensington. So Kensington was a development, or is a development in Brisbane. It didn't go according to plan, and I'm not going to go into all the details of why. And it went through a thorough due diligence from the old investment committee, etc. And yet it didn't go according to plan. And we actually had a potential buyer, and we waited and we waited and we waited. We finally pulled the plug on the buyer in April. And that's when we had to rally round. And I always say in business, it's not what you do when it's working, it's what you do when it's not working. And for me, this was a classic case again of old power, new power. The old power model was to try and run away as fast as possible and distance yourself as much as you possibly can, from the problem. Whereas the new power model is not about that. It's get your hands dirty, get in, get it fixed, And when I look at what the WealthE team did between Paul and Richard, it really is a testament to how much they care about investors. And, sometimes you can't solve something in the short term, but you care enough to ensure that you'll solve it in the long term. I always joke with people, if you read chapter 13 of my book, Properly Going Global, I actually talk in chapter 13 about all my mistakes. And I believe that I've built my reputation, and the company has built its reputation on being able to help people when it's not working, because we care and we will do what it takes to find and solve the problems. The fifth one is about the power of giving. The fifth lesson is the power of giving. And it was really interesting to me. I've always believed in the principle of Zig Ziglar. You can have anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. So I'm going to repeat that. You can have anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. Well, this guy called Jeff Hayes, I've known him for more than 5 years. I met him through Roger Hamilton in Bali. Amazing guy, does these incredible documentaries. But he's got these, they call them a docu-series. And he got some of the greatest authorities in wealth together and did this docu-series, and actually said to me, if you want to be part of it, you can, but you need to fly over at your own cost. So at our own cost from a company perspective, I flew all the way to Salt Lake City, gave of my time and my money, I suppose. And they got all these different people to do that. No one actually paid any money to add value, really, because we all believed so much in the project of like sharing it with millions of people around the principles of wealth. I'm sick and tired of the terrible stats around the world and how literally only 1% of people get wealthy. 94% of people at the age of 65 are dead broke or reliant on the government, and that's worldwide. It's actually worse in emerging economies. And or you 5% of people are financially independent, but that actually just means, according to the financial industry, 25% poorer. And so I went over as part of it with incredible people like Roger Hamilton, like Robert Kiyosaki, and many others. And they then gave that docu-series out for free. It's amazing. So everyone always wants to, old power model wants to hold on to all the material and try and sell it and make a profit, whereas they gave it away for free, okay? And they gave it away over a 10-day period. And blow me down, on the back end of their sales, they made over $2 million from that. So the power of giving is just phenomenal, and giving it away of where it's going. And when you look at impact investing, and impact investing was very, very small in 2009. And yet in 2020, it's expected to be $1 trillion. Richard Branson says, doing good in business is not just good, it's good for business. Like, the world has fundamentally changed. It's all about new power. It's all about purpose. And it's all about how much value can you actually add, and how much good can you do in the world. And, really kudos to Jeff Hayes and them. It's a phenomenal project they did. They got so much reach. We got so much feedback and value out of it. By giving, we got so much. And, it's fundamental principles which are so valuable. The sixth one is about blockchain. And I wanted to share a slide with you here, and I need to find this slide quickly, around the 6 Ds of disruption. So there's a guy called Peter Diamandis that I'd highly recommend that you go and check out if you don't know. I had the privilege of learning from him at Singularity University, which is one of the top tech universities in the world, on the NASA campus in Silicon Valley. And it's really interesting because it goes, there's 6 phases when an industry gets changed. It first gets digitized, then it's deceptive, then it's disruptive. Finally, it becomes dematerialized, demonetized, and democratized. Again, I talk about this in a huge amount of detail in the trends, webinar that I did. But what's interesting is with blockchain is that blockchain was all the hype in 2017, even to some extent 2018, and then it completely disappeared. But it's very much in the deceptive phase, and it hasn't got to the disruptive phase yet. Many people, including myself, believe that blockchain is going to have a bigger impact on your life than the internet. I don't have time today to share what blockchain is, but if I share with you a slide, you can actually see the blockchain hype cycle, or what they call the Gartner hype cycle. You can see what happened with cryptocurrency, but you can see the steady investment in blockchain and how blockchain is literally disrupting businesses around the world. It's disrupting banking. Virtually every bank is already involved in blockchain projects. Governments are involved in blockchain projects. And if you're not in blockchain projects, then you really need to open your eyes as to where the world's going. Now, what's fascinating is that the old school, old power business models are still scared of blockchain. We got turned down just yesterday from a money movement company through our KYC because we talk about how we are getting involved in blockchain. And it's amazing. They didn't just not want to work with us, they didn't just ignore us, they blocked us from a KYC perspective. And it's just so naive in terms of where the world is going and how blockchain is going to have such an impact in terms of the world. And for you as an investor and or business owner or shareholder or whatever, it's really, really important that you understand what is going on. The other one that I wanted to share with you was about O2O. And this is a new one that I found out about this year, which is online to offline. And it's really, really interesting because the biggest VC fund in the world, SoftBank, which is like 5 times bigger than any other VC fund, is only investing in O2O projects, be they Alibaba, be they WeWork, Flipkart, which is all online to offline. So again, it fits in with what I said in lesson number 2, that it's not only about digital, it's about the human experience. It's about digitizing real life stuff. So take Uber, you know, they digitized transport. Take Airbnb, they digitized accommodation. Take Migrate, they're digitizing property. This is the future. It's all about O2O. You know, the web has changed. It's gone from web 1.0 to web 2.0 to web 3.0. And web 3.0, as I explained in that trends video, is all around social commerce. This is where the world's going. And it's really important that you start to understand these new powers, both models and new power values, so that you can succeed in this world of O2O. And what's interesting is if you take real estate, that Vision Fund, the biggest, you know, literally venture capital fund in the world, is going after real estate because they know that it's one of the oldest, most archaic industries in the world. I call it a $217 trillion market. They call it a $228 trillion. Doesn't really matter. There's enough blue sky for all of us to make a hell of a lot of money in that space in terms of what is happening around the world. Okay, lesson number 8 is all around Society 5.0. So this is an interesting one, and let me jump quickly to this slide. And I think this one is under my world. No, wait. Let me go to here. So Society 5.0 is a concept that came out from the Japanese this year. It was held at the G20. It was also at the World Economic Forum. It was one of the major things. And this is how the world is evolving. You know, we've literally gone from the agrarian age. Sorry, let's get this slide going. Slides. There it is. We've gone from the hunting age society to the agrarian society to the industrial society to the information society. Most of you are still stuck in Society 4.0. And as we go into the new decade, you have to start preparing for Society 5.0, which is all around the creative society. It's about digital transformation and how your imagination and creativity can create value and solve massive problems. You know, there's 17 major problems that the United Nations actually crowdsourced as the major problems they want to solve by 2030. The number one problem in the world is poverty. That's the one we're going after. Worldwide wealth and how we can empower the 99% to be able to invest like the top 1%. You know, as we change from Society 4.0 to Society 5.0, it's about problem solving and value creation, diversity, decentralization, resilience, and about sustainability and environmental harmony. And if you haven't looked into it, I'd highly recommend you go and look into Roger Hamilton. If you're an entrepreneur that talks about Entrepreneur 5.0, it's all around insight, impact, income, high tech, and high touch. We talk a lot about Wealth 5.0, which is also about impact, your creativity and value creation, high touch and how many people are you adding value to in the world, high tech and how you're using, you know, technology, and then digital, and ultimately about problem solving and future proofing, not only for yourself, but for future generations and the planet. And, you know, again, it's fascinating what is happening around the world in terms of the space. Hilda Lunderstedt, who's one of our, you know, anchor investors, also shared an incredible wealth weekend with our top investors, wealth partners, and VIPs all around Life 5.0. And it was amazing how the impact that she had on people around that. Lesson number 9 is compliance. And it's amazing how slow compliance changes. You know, I read an article just this morning from the SEC that they're looking to change accredited investors. The laws came out in 1934. They haven't changed since 1934. And yet they try and fit round pegs in square holes. But the good news is that things are starting to change around the world. Just this morning, the SEC came out and said that they're looking to change what an accredited investor is so that the rest of the world can now participate in investing online, investing in shares, investing in property, which is absolutely fantastic. You know, the FSCA in South Africa, you know, we started the African Crowdfunding Association back in literally 2015. It's taken 4 years of effort and quite frankly, very little progress. And yet this year they started a sandbox. We were invited to be part of the top 12 companies in Africa, to be part of their Fintech, you know, accelerator. And it's just so exciting where it's going and how the regulators around the world are starting to adopt and change towards this fintech, towards this technology disruption and change that is happening. And one of the things that we're really excited about this year is we managed to get our global compliance, which has never happened before. It doesn't exist in terms of the world of global platforms, global marketplaces in the property space, real estate space. We're the only one worldwide that has a global compliance structure in place. And that's actually taken us years and years and years, but it's really, really exciting. And it's obviously a massive barrier to entry equally. Number 10 is about leaders and teamwork. It's amazing. Two examples of this was England in 2015. I love rugby. If you know anything about me, I absolutely love rugby. And in 2015, England were kicked out of the Rugby World Cup before they even got to the quarterfinals. They were absolutely useless. And yet they got a new coach in Eddie Jones. And they didn't change the players. They didn't even change the captain. But literally they changed the coach. And with that coach, they've had one of the most successful 4-year periods in English rugby history. They got to the finals of the Rugby World Cup in 2015. But there was another team who was equally useless up until 2017, even more recently. And in 2018, they actually changed the coach as well. And they brought in a guy called Rassie Erasmus. Sorry, I just need a drink. He did change the captain. He took a very strategic gamble, but he kept all the same players. And all that they did was give them direction, give them clarity, simplify the game plan. And what was fascinating is that coming to the 2019 World Cup final, you had England that didn't even make the quarters in 2015, and you had South Africa that had played horrendous rugby right up. In fact, the worst they've ever played, the worst rankings they'd ever got up until 2017. And by literally changing the coach, changing one leader, and that leader giving everyone direction, clarity, and simplification. The Springboks actually had a very boring game plan, but they did it very well. And they ended up meeting England in the final and actually beating England. And, for me, there's such a good lesson there on leadership and the ability of leadership and how to get teams work and how one individual can make such a difference in terms of teamwork. And another great example of that is our China team. We went into China in 2016. We invested $1 million. We wasted a lot of money. We wasted a lot of time. We got virtually no results in 2016. And we changed the leadership. We changed one person. And that man, with a great team, in 2017, they raised $500,000 in equity. In 2018, they raised $1.1 million in equity. And this year, they're on track to raise over $7 million in equity. That's the example of a leader and the impact that they can have in terms of their team. Number 11, for me, is all around leadership. And I went on a leadership conference. They call it Leadership Mastery with Tony Robbins in San Diego for 4 days. I actually signed up for it three years ago, but I've always been too busy to actually go along and be part of it. I shared with our inner circle, and if you're interested in our inner circle, go to wealthuniversity.org and go and find out all about it. I shared everything that I learned on that leadership mastery over 2 different webinars with our inner circle, community. But I think that one of the biggest things for me that was such a takeaway, well, actually 2 things. The first was state. So as the world changes and you want to change the world, your state is so important. And your state is driven by 3 things: your physiology, your focus, and your language. Now, I go into that in a huge amount of detail, as part of the inner circle. And if you join the inner circle, you can go into the library of all the content that we've created this year and go and learn all about it. It's just amazing. If you want to be a leader, if you want to have an impact in the world, if you want to grow wealth, be an entrepreneur, build a great company, change the world, it's all about starting with you. You can't change others. You can't change the rest of the world until you change you. And it all starts with your state, and it all starts with the way you start the day every day. And the second thing that I love about leadership is about being resourceful. Every single person on this planet has a constraint. Whether you Bill Gates, whether you Richard Branson, whether you Warren Buffett, they would all like more money to do more. And so they've got to be very resourceful with what resources they've got, money, time, etc. And so the question for you as a leader is, how resourceful are you being? If your state and if your energy and human emotion is one of the most important things to your success, the second thing is all about how resourceful you are, your resourcefulness as a leader. And for those of you who want to join the inner circle, I'd highly recommend going and running through the 2 mastery sessions I went through. It was an amazing opportunity to go and learn. The 12th lesson for me, and it's one I've spoken of quite a lot, but I think it's time to bring it out again, is around flow. And let me bring up a diagram for you here quickly. And again, I learned this from Roger Hamilton in 2011, and it was one of the best lessons I ever learned, is that, you know, we can all go out there and we can be the best we can be. And we're always taught in school, you know, I was terrible at languages. And so, you know, I was always taught, you know, well, go and learn more English, go and learn more Afrikaans, go and learn more Zulu. But I was useless at languages. And, you know, in business, I was terrible at systems. And it was like, well, spend all your time in systems. And actually, until I met Roger Hamilton, and you can go and look it up, called Wealth Dynamics, where rather figure out who you are. Like, I'm a creator, like Richard Branson. I like to create things. That means I'm big picture. It means that I can see into the future. I can see the big picture. But I hate details. This is details down the bottom. I'm somewhere in between people and systems. And there's 8 different profiles. And, you know, what's really, you know, different, you know, you've got stars, you've got supporters, you've got deal makers, you've got traders, you've got accumulators, you've got lords, and you've got mechanics. Now, I don't have time to go into it. But one of the things that's most important in any team is, firstly, to get a team balance. So to get the right people on the bus, as they always say, and then get people to be doing what they're doing in flow. And as an example, for me as a CEO, I don't like managing people. I'm a bad manager. I think I'm a great leader, but I'm a bad manager. And so one of the things we did this year was bring in a COO, Chief Operating Officer, so that he can help manage the team. He can run the rhythm on a quarterly basis, both a quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily rhythm with dashboards. And I know I went through this in the lessons last year, so I'm not going to do it again, with team charters and metrics and everything else. He can run the rhythm, and I can play beyond the 3 years, the 3 months. Yes, I can support within the 3 months in projects and promotions, and they can make sure they're executing and hitting the milestones. But I need to be in the future. I need to be helping grow the company to where we need to be for the future, and growing the team and the leadership, and really being in my flow and allowing me to do what I'm best at, and allowing others to do what they're best at. And as an example, you know, Gavin, you know, the people that are leading the team in the different leadership roles are supporters and deal makers and traders, you know, because they're all about the detail and about people and how to get the best out of people. So really interesting. You know, I probably brought this up in lessons in the past, but I wanted to reiterate it. Sometimes you know something, but if you know something and you're not doing it, then you don't know it. And it was a good example for me with Wealth Dynamics again this year, and going back and reviewing and trying to get people into flow. The 13th lesson is about India. I went to India for the first time last year in August. I went back for business again this year in August, funny enough. And, you know, but India for me is such an opportunity. I mean, in 2015, I went to China, and China was an incredible opportunity. But I didn't realize how hard China would be. You know, there's no, you can't speak the language, you've got no cultural understanding. Everything you've ever created, every book, every video, every white paper, everything you've ever written had to be translated. Whereas when we went to India, there was an amazing opportunity. You could connect with people straight away. You could talk cricket to them. They speak English. You know, everyone in the business community speaks English well, so you can connect straight away. There's this thirst. There's this growing middle class, just like in China, and there's, you know, something like 400 million people that are already in the middle class. It's expected to grow to 1 billion people in India. The economy is growing by 8%. They're exuberant. They're happy. There's a lot of excitement there. And I was just blown away by the opportunity in India. You know, when you bring in what I said to you already with education-based marketing, the growth within the economy, they love 2 things more than anything: gold and property. And, you know, we see India as a massive opportunity. And although it's taking us some time, we've learned our lessons from China in terms of doing stuff properly. We heavily are going to get involved in India in 2020, because, you know, there's such an opportunity in India around what is happening. The 14th lesson is Africa. And what's really interesting for me is that this year, more and more people are talking about Africa. You know, it's interesting. I'm on a bunch of WhatsApp groups, you know, from around the world, and Indian VCs, there's a huge amount of Chinese venture capital going into India because they see India as the next market where they've made significant money like they've made in China. And after India, a lot of them are starting to come into Africa. There's been a lot of venture capital funding coming into Africa now. So between Africa and India, when they look at the growth and the value and the money that was the wealth that was created in China over the last 20 years, as you had this huge rise of people into the Chinese middle class, and the growth of the internet and companies like Alibaba and Tencent and WeChat, et cetera, you know, private equity, Naspers invested $20 million in WeChat, but today it's in Tencent, but today is worth like 40, $50 billion. They reckon it's the best private equity deal ever done. And people are now coming back into India, or not coming back, they're coming into India, they're coming into Africa, because they see the rise of the middle class, they see what's happening with mobile adoption and access to education and internet and everything else. And I talk about this a lot in the trends around the world, but you need to understand this stuff. Like, this is where the world's going. It's why I still live in Africa, because I love this place, and I believe that it's critically important that we have an understanding of emerging markets. My son, people go, why don't you move to Australia? Why don't you move to England? Why don't you move to America? I could move to any three of those countries. I've got businesses in all three of those countries. I've got passports. I could move tomorrow morning, but I don't want to. I love living in Africa, and I think the future is India, Africa, China, the emerging markets, Brazil. And for my son, I think it's critically important that he learns how to thrive in the chaos of emerging markets, because that's what the future is all about. The 15th lesson is about the Rockefeller strategy. And if I share with you here, the Rockefeller strategy, we spoke about it with our wealth partners, our shareholders, back in July, because it was a strategy that we were launching. And if you go here, sorry, I thought I had it on the slide, but clearly not. So the big lesson that can be learned is from Amazon. And Amazon, through strategic partners, actually, grew into the biggest marketplace in the world, and it created so much wealth. If you look at what Jeff Bezos, but anyone that invested in Amazon, like I said, $10,000 pre-IPO is worth $12 million today. WeWork, okay, it hasn't done so successfully in the last couple of months, but equally all through strategic partnership. And why we called it the Rockefeller strategy is I'd highly recommend watching a documentary called Men Who Built America about Carnegie and Rockefeller and JP Morgan and Henry Ford. Absolutely fascinating. What's interesting is that even though it was 150, 120 years ago, there's so many lessons you can copy. And Rockefeller, through acquisitions, through strategic partnerships, through thinking through the value cycle, went out and at one time had more than 90% of the world's distribution in oil, all sort of in one marketplace. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're going out. We're not trying to do everything. Property is very localized. It'll always be localized. So it's finding trusted partners, be they property companies or real estate companies, sponsors, or even platforms, or even businesses. And we've joined with them. We've got a strategy of business to consumer, business to business, and business to platform, where we look at actually integrating all those different strategies. And it's what we call the Rockefeller strategy. We're not making this up ourselves. Amazon used it, like I said. Many other successful marketplace or platform companies have used it. And it's one of the ways that we're going to grow exponentially in our strategic markets going forward. And if you're in a market, we're talking to people in Saudi Arabia, we're talking to people in India, we're talking to people in South Africa, we're talking to people in Brazil and Indonesia. If you're in a market and want to join our Rockefeller strategy, you certainly can. And I'm not going to bore you with all the slides, but there's a business model somewhere. I don't know where the business model's gone. Hang on 2 seconds. This is what I wanted to show you. Where for us, we've got a B2C, B2B, and B2P strategy. And this is all about old power versus new power. Like, this is new power thinking. These are new power models. It's about 1 + 1 equaling 3, or in some cases, even 1 + 1 equaling 11. It's not about trying to do everything yourself. It's about strategic partnerships. And even when you look at Uber, they tried to go into China. They spent billions of dollars in China. They got a massive hiding in China. And they finally sold out to the Chinese company, which is called Didi. And that now today is another $50 billion company, of which Uber owns 20-odd% or something. It's a classic example of the whole partnership model, strategic partnership model, and it's what we call the Rockefeller strategy. The 16th lesson for me is about exponential change. There's so many things that I've been watching, be it Peter Diamandis. There's a book I read called Thank You for Being Late that I would recommend. If you're new to the space, go read Bold, equally by Peter Diamandis. And as we go into a new decade, it's so interesting. But there are so many changes that are happening. There's societal changes. There's technology changes. There's economic changes. There's financial changes. There's regulatory changes. And there's environmental changes. And what's really happening is that they talk about exponential change. And there's a great metaphor of the story of many decades, many centuries ago, the guy invented chess. And the emperor in China was so impressed by the chess at the time that he said to the guy, "You can have anything you want in the world. What do you want?" And he said, "Well, I want some rice." And the emperor said, "Well, whatever you want, no problem." There's 64 pieces on a chessboard. And he said, "Well, what I want is if you could put one piece of rice on the first square and then double it on the second square and then double it again on the third square. So one on square 1, 2 on square 2, 4 on square 3, etc." And the emperor said, "No problem, you can have anything you want." And by the time, if you keep doubling the rice, by the time they got to square 64, it was more rice than the world had ever consumed in the history of the world. And the emperor was so upset that he had the guy killed. So maybe it's not such a good idea to be a smart ass. But it's all about exponential thinking. And what most people believe is that we're now in the second half of the chessboard. These doublings have been happening, but people haven't been noticing them. We've been in the disruptive phase. And as we go into the next decade, we're going into we've been in the deceptive phase. As we go into the next decade, we're going into the disruptive phase. It's going to fundamentally change your life. It's going to change your children's lives. It's going to change the way education's done. It's going to change your business. It's going to change the way people invest. It's going to change wealth. It's going to change education. It's going to change investing. Pretty much going to change business as you know it. And if you don't know about this stuff, go and watch my webinar I did on the 8 trends that are changing from a societal perspective, from a technology perspective, how they're all intersecting, how it actually, the next decade is going to be one of so much change that if you don't understand it, it's going to be you're going to battle to survive. Yet if you understand it, you can take advantage of it. Opportunity and chaos. Chaos is fantastic. It's opportunity. And it'll allow you to not just survive the next decade, but thrive in the next decade. I believe that many generational opportunities are going to be available going into the next decade, of which there is one in investment, in wealth, in real estate, as they are completely disrupted by technology and all these changes, not just technology changes, but regulatory, environmental, societal changes that are happening around the world, financial, etc. And so, as we go into the next decade, I highly, highly recommend that you look into that and that you understand it. And there's a great slide which I wanted to share with you here, which is an example of companies that are not changing. And here it is here. And if I go back up to it, I talk a lot about the mistakes that people make when it comes to investing. And this is a fascinating one, because I believe that people actually aren't future-proofing themselves. So, we got a white paper on all the mistakes that people make. And if you want to go to our Wealth University or get hold of us to download our eWealth pack, which comes as part of our inner circle, where I've taken 20 years worth of knowledge and put it all in one place. And you can read all these white papers, whether you're a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced, whether you're just creating wealth in real estate, you're starting to invest internationally, or you want to create a global portfolio, we've got white papers to help people with it. But the one that I'm most interested in is where the world's going and the technology changes and how people are not future-proofing themselves. In America, shopping centers are going bankrupt left, right, and center. I remember meeting a lady probably a year ago now, and she was buying shopping centers in South Africa. And I said, "Are you crazy? Like, shopping centers are going bankrupt in America." And she said, "No, man, e-commerce will never come to Africa." And I was like, "What?" Like, we had ox wagons maybe a little bit longer than America did, but it didn't take long for cars to turn up. And it was just amazing this year, because I was I was reading on the internet, and, South African investors invested in one of the biggest property funds in England that invests in all the top shopping centers, and it lost 30% of its value. And it's all the big names. It's Coronation, Public Investment Corporation, Sanlam, Investec, Old Mutual, Stanley, PSG. And that's a classic example of not future-proofing. Like, if you go to Amazon now, I was at a friend's house, and he literally bought a screw, and it was delivered in less than an hour later using things like Amazon Prime. Like, why would people waste their time to go shopping? And yet the biggest old school, old power companies are investing like they always have, and they wonder why things are changing. And I always joke, even when it comes to marketing, as long as you can afford marketing in the airport, then clearly you should be trusted, which is a bit of a joke, but probably a little bit more truth in that joke than people like to admit. So then we move on to lesson number 17, and it's the 20-20-20 principle. So this is something I learned years and years ago, and it's a story of an American couple. They go to Venice, they're in St. Mark's Square, and they sit down, they're having tea, and they see this painter come up, and the painter starts to paint a picture, and it takes him 20 minutes. And the wife loves the picture. So she goes up to the painter and says, hey, listen, I really want to buy your picture. How much does it cost? And he says, $20,000. And she says, what? Are you crazy? I'm not paying $20,000 for that picture. And he said, well, you're not paying, $20,000. Oh, sorry. She says, I'm not paying $20,000 for watching you paint a picture, or for a picture I watch you paint in 20 minutes. And he says, well, you're not paying for the 20 minutes it took me to paint the picture. You're paying for the 20 years that it's taken me to be able to paint it in 20 minutes. And my lesson to you for this is that most of us underestimate the value of the years that we've traveled, the journeys that we've traveled, the relationships that we've created, the track record we've created, the brands we've created, the clients we've added value to. And people like to come along and steal that. People like to come along and borrow that. People like to come along and ignore the value of that. And I always remind myself of the parable or the story of the 20-20-20 principle. And sometimes if you've been around for a while and you've been adding value to people and whatever, sometimes just remind yourself of the 20-20-20 value, and don't give away stuff for free. Consider the value that you're adding to people, and really, sometimes just pat yourself on the back and remember the principle of the 20-20-20 lesson. As we go into the new decade, we've had 2 decades within the 21st century. This third decade is expected to be one of the most influential decades in human history. It's like when the printing press came out in 1440. It was like during the industrial age when the steam engine was invented in the 1700s. It's like when Henry Ford brought cars to the middle class in the early 1900s. It's like when E-Trade came out in the 1980s and made investing in the stock market available to everyone. It's like when the internet came out in the late 1990s and how that became available to everyone. And we're about to have a generational wealth transfer. We're about to have a generational opportunity. And remember the 20-20-20 principle when you're thinking around the value you've created over the many years in your past and decades, and figure out how you can use that experience, because the fundamentals of business and investing don't change, but you need to metamorphose now in terms of the old power and old model, and you need to metamorphose into the new power and the new model as we go into the new decade. It becomes so fundamentally important. But there's another lesson, and that's lesson number 18, which is where I learned this from my uncle 20 years ago, and it's called "The One-Eyed Man Can Lead the Blind." A story from me was that I was on site. I was a site manager. I'd done my honors degree and my dissertation on how technology was going to change property. And then I went to London when I was 21, and I found a master's. And there were only 2 universities in England that were doing a master's in construction property technology. So I did it. I did it full-time on top of a full-time job. And when I graduated, when I was 23, I went to my boss and I said, listen, I want to put tech across your entire company, which was a little bit, presumptuous. And anyway, I wasn't allowed to be a director because I was too young, but I sat at board level as the group IT manager, which was quite interesting. 23-year-old sitting on a £100 million company in England at board level. And I didn't know if I could do it. And I went to my lecturer, I went to my uncle, and my lecturer said, yes, you can definitely do it. And I went to my uncle, and my uncle said, Scott, the one-eyed man can lead the blind. And what I mean by that is that, always remind yourself that the one-eyed man can lead the blind. No one knows about blockchain. No one knows about cryptocurrency. Very few people understand, exponential technologies. And so if you don't understand it, don't get scared as we go into the next decade. Partner with people. One of the fastest ways to mastery is to, partner with people. If you're a massive company, a massive property company, a bank, a real estate investment trust, a property fund, partner with fintechs. They've been there. They've done it. Marry together the 20-20 principle with the one-eyed man can lead the blind. But don't be scared. You only have to know a little bit more than the guy next to you. And as we go into this new time, whether you're 20 years old or whether you're 60 years old, things are changing so fast. It is not what you know for the last 40 years. It's how fast you can learn and grow. It's how fast you can adapt. It's how fast you can be a leader and manage your state. It's how fast you can be resourceful within these changing times and embrace the change. And so for me, it's a combination between lesson, the previous lesson, what was it, lesson 17, around the 20-20-20 principle, and not forgetting of the value and what you've created over the last couple of years and decades, but also marrying it together with the one-eyed man can lead the blind. You know, it reminds me of a great lesson I learned from Jeff Bezos, where he said, there's only 4 things he can teach you about business. The first one is always look after the customer. The second is always go for long-term value creation. Don't go for quarterly shareholder distributions or whatever. Go for long-term value. The third is it's never black or white. It's never yes or no. It's and both. And refer to lessons 1 and 2 as to how you can get it and both. And the fourth one, which is the point for today, is you're only as good as today. You know, today is the first day of the rest of your life. And so, you know, I highly, highly recommend, you know, that thinking as we go into the new decade. And that brings me to the last slide. And it's really an interesting slide for me. And it's also a very interesting last lesson. So let me get the slide up for you quickly. And the question I've got for you really, as we go into the new decade, is what sort of impact do you want to have on this planet? You know, a lot of people don't really understand the impact that they can have on the planet. And, you know, sorry, I'm just looking for the slide quickly. And how big they want to play. Where's it gone now? Sorry, give me 2 seconds as I just get this up. Here's the slide I wanted. Am I sharing my screen? No. And so the last lesson is, what impact do you want to have on the planet? You know, as we go into a new decade, as we go into one of the 6 most exciting decades in human history, of which you're going to be part of it, you can be scared of it or you can be excited. And you need to decide what impact you're going to have. Do you want to have a level 1 where you're just adding, you know, solving one person's problem? Do you want to, you know, solve a group problem? Do you want to build a business where it becomes predictable and scalable? Do you want to become a market leader? Do you want a national impact, or do you want a global impact? And my lesson is that, you know, in the old days, you had to be Mother Teresa and you had to give up all your worldwide possessions and go and live in India and, you know, try and change the world. Even Nelson Mandela, 27 years in jail, or Gandhi, you know, huge personal sacrifice. But today, what's so exciting is you can solve some of the greatest challenges on the planet, and you can equally build a tremendous amount of wealth for yourself. You can have an impact on the planet. You no longer have to wish like what the future will look like. You can create the future. The best way to predict the future is to create the future. You can decide what impact you want to have on this planet. You can decide how many people and how much value you want to add. And as you go into the next decade, my lesson to you is get clear on the impact you want to have. How much value do you want to have? And remember, if you want to have a global impact or even a national impact, it comes with self-sacrifice. There are challenges. It is difficult. You know, I look at some of my peers in the property industry, and they're making a lot more money than me in the short term. It's easy to go sell houses. It's easy to raise cash for a commercial building. But if you want to have a truly global, national or global impact, it takes a lot longer. And, you know, as Jeff Bezos says, I mean, he doesn't invest in mercenaries, he invests in missionaries. He invests in people that want to literally are doing it for the purpose-driven impact, where they can go and change the world. They can have a meaningful impact on the world. We launched the WealthE movement back in 2015 to create a better and more sustainable planet for all. And I highly encourage you all to get involved and to come and, be, if you don't know what to do, come and join the WealthE movement. If you do know and you've got other projects, you know, we've got an incredible young man called Bongi that we've put through crowdfunding, through private schooling, and he's having such a material impact, and he could be the next Elon Musk. He goes into his final year of school this year. My request to you, my lesson to you, is remember Zig Ziglar's principle. You can have anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. Decide what impact you want to have, and then figure out how much value you can add to the planet as you go into this next decade. And I want to finish with a story. You've probably heard it many times, but it's worth listening to. There's an old man and a young boy walking along a beach. And the young boy, he looks at the old man because he's confused, because every now and again, the old man bends down, picks up a starfish, and throws it into the sea. And the young boy looks at this with complete confusion, and he watches, and the old man walks a bit further, and he bends down, and he picks up a starfish, and he throws it in the sea. And the young boy looks up across the beach, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of starfish. He watches the old man bends down and picks up a starfish, and he throws it in the sea. And eventually the young boy can't hold himself back anymore. He's too intrigued. And he says to the old man, he says, Why are you doing this? It is such a waste of time. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of starfish. And the old man walks a little bit and ponders. He bends down, picks up a starfish, and throws it into the sea. And he says, young man, it mattered for that starfish. If you want to have a massive impact on this planet, if you want to empower 1 billion people and create the planet that you want to see, it starts with one person. You don't do 1 billion people. You don't change 1 billion people. You change one person at a time. And it starts with you. You need to decide what impact you're going to have. You need to decide what value you're going to create in the world. And my final lesson, my final bit of guidance or advice as we finish this decade is that it's not what you can get out of this decade, but it's what you can give that will ultimately determine how successful you are in the next decade. So that's me, Scott Picken. Thank you very much. If you want to reach out to me, I think there's a slide here with all my contact details. And yep, here it is here. If you want to reach out to me, reach out to me. And, you know, don't email me. I hate email, but send me a WhatsApp. And yeah, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you to all my team members. It's been a tough year. It always is when you're in a high growth company. Really appreciate everything you've done. Thank you to our community and everyone that has supported us. Really, really value everything that you've done and so grateful for the community we've got. Thank you to all our strategic partners and the people that keep coming and partnering with us and adding value to our platform and to our marketplace. We really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you who've watched this video. If you enjoy it, as I said, please share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel. We want to add value to at least 1 billion people. We can't do it on our own. And I really encourage you as we go into the next decade, figure out how we can share these messages, we can share the self-belief, we can share the knowledge. But I just wanted to acknowledge you and say thank you so much. I hope I added value to you with these 19 different lessons for 2019. If I did, share your comments below. I'd love to get your feedback. Share any great books that you recommend for 2019 or any great videos. And most importantly, have a beautiful end to this year. Have a great festive season with your family and friends. And as we go into the next decade, remember, it's not what you get out of the next decade that is going to determine you. It's what you give. Thank you very much. Signing out, Scott Picken. Cheers.